Welcome to SIBO. No, it's not the Lion King. Okay, so when we look at this small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, okay, we're getting so many different comments, okay, on YouTube and around to have people ask for specific diseases. And the tough part, you're going to see the same solution, okay, for a lot of different diseases and conditions. And when we do a talk like this, you're going to see, like, some people say, well, irritable bowel syndrome is totally different than Crohn's, which is totally different than ulcerative colitis, but the solution is the same. And the causes are pretty darn close to the same. Okay, so when we look at this, according to the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology, we're looking at small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, defined as excessive bacteria in the small intestine, remains a poorly understood disease. Initially, it was thought to occur only in a small number of patients. It is now apparent that this disorder is more prevalent than previously thought. So how do you know you have it? Well, let's look at the symptoms. I mean, now look at this, because when you look at this, think of the body as being intelligent. Okay, we got nausea, bloating, vomiting, and diarrhea. So that means something is not right in the intestinal tract. It's either your body is trying to get rid of it from either end. Bloating, so that means possibly slow gastric motility, and we're going to go over how the intestinal tract works. Malnutrition means that your body is not being able to break down the nutrients. Weight loss, joint pain, that means that if the joint starts to hurt, it means the blood isn't healthy, so you can't get healthy synovial fluid production. Fatigue, that means low nutrient production. Rashes, acne, eczema, those are all the body trying to use the skin as a detoxicant. So it means that the system is being poisoned. Depression, that means low serotonin production. Rosacea, it's redness of the skin, again, a detoxing response. So just looking at the symptoms, we know what's going wrong. Okay, now, well, I mean, real doctors do. Okay, now, you're looking, prevalence rates of SIBO in young and middle age appears to be low. So it means that something has to happen later on, although the young people they're getting it on the rise. Okay, consistently in older patients, the overall prevalence of SIBO in the general public is unknown. In general, SIBO is substantially underdiagnosed because it's very difficult to diagnose a bacterial overgrowth. Now, if you have this, okay, abnormal bacteria in the small intestine, it's going to predispose you to a number of other conditions. And we're talking like irritable bowel, celiac, cirrhosis of the liver, lactose problems, morbidly obese, diabetes, motility disorders, pancreatitis. Now, what are some of the complications? And again, I'm just running through the facts here and the stats, and this is out of that big book, okay, that if you're utilizing medical care for health, which we really don't recommend because they are the leading causes of death in America, okay, well, it's true. Okay, you know, but this is the book that they use, okay? And everybody, once you have this category, or you're labeled, okay, with harlot or adulterer or SIBO, okay, you're set up for certain, you know, therapies. Well, complications, malnutrition, vitamin B deficiency, interesting, B12. So when you look at that, isn't that made or processed, but you need intrinsic factor from the stomach? So this, again, it's all the intestinal tract. Anemia, poor fat absorption, so that means that perhaps the duodenum isn't working right or the gallbladder isn't working right. Kidney stones, damage to the intestinal lining. Now, it's interesting, when we look at this, SIBO develops when the normal homeostatic mechanisms that control enteric bacterial populations are disrupted. Okay, I'm going to stop there just for a second. So the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth are from a disruption of the normal bacteria that's there. You should be saying, duh. Okay. Two processes that are most commonly predisposed to bacterial overgrowth are diminished: gastric acid secretions and small intestinal dysmotility. Now, what that means is that when you eat something, you're going to produce an acid, and that acid has, it's got digestive aspects to it, where it does break down food, but it also kills pathogenic bacteria, and it does reduce bacteria. And also small intestinal dysmotility. There is a peristaltic wave, a wave that pushes food down through the entire digestive tract, and so that's altered. So now when we look at this, we're looking at low gastric acid secretion and a slowing of the motility. And it's interesting too, because when you read something, and this is out of the big book, that the leading cause of death, that if you utilize them for medical care that you're going to go to, that big book, okay, and they're looking at this and they're saying, well, we don't really know what causes it. And then all of a sudden, we know what causes it, okay. Now, gastric acid, it suppresses the growth of ingested bacteria, limiting the number of bacteria in the intestinal tract. Now, diminished acid production, hypochlorhydria, is a risk factor for increasing it. Okay, and now this is one of the things that happens as we age. As we age, we produce less acid. This is why we start wrinkling, we start to get loose joints. If you're not taking digestive enzymes or pre-digesting your food with juicing or blending. So as we age, there's less acid secreted. And so that kind of makes sense that SIBO would occur in people that are older. It does. Now it's interesting, Helicobacter, this one was discovered back in the late 80s, early 90s, and when I was just taking microbiology. And they used to think that the stomach is so acidic, there's no way you can find bacteria in there. Bam, they find it. Okay, now they say, hey, we got the cause of all the ulcers. Then they thought, don't, okay, it looks like it's in about half the world's population, and it's asymptomatic in about 70% of those people. And the reason they've only found it in half is because they just haven't really looked. So now they're starting to think, well, wait a second, this bacteria that we knew couldn't possibly exist, now we see it in most of the world's population. Perhaps it's normal flora. Because this Helicobacter, and helico just means like helicopter, live in the mucosal layer that covers and protects the tissue and lining of the stomach and the small intestine. Ah, so this bacteria, if it's normal flora, okay, if it's in there, and bacteria are very competitive. Okay, they always fight for the same environment. They're competitive with funguses and yeast and bacteria, or other bacteria and viruses. So it's interesting. I love the American College of Gastroenterology. It's not clear how H. pylori spreads. It may be transmitted person to person by close contact, such as kissing. People may also contract H. pylori through food or water. That's weird, okay? You know, this sucker survives in stomach acid. I don't care how much tongue you're getting. I doubt if you're getting down that low, okay? Am I the only one thinking that? God, I hope not. Okay, so so when we look at this, and it's interesting too, because I really think that it's affecting way bigger population, but they just haven't found it yet because it's inside the gastric mucosal. Scientists aren't sure why it affects some people and not others. Well, longer tongues. Why some people have never become infected at all. 70% of the people that get it are asymptomatic. Yeah, no kidding, okay? If it's normal. Okay, now, it's interesting. The risk of infected people developing peptic ulcer during their lifetime is 10 to 15%. The risk of gastric cancer is less than 3%. Interesting. Gastric cancer is less than 3% if you have Helicobacter. So now, what are some of the drugs? We know that as we age, we don't produce much acid. Now, if you've seen those commercials where the comedian runs, jumps his sea-doo over through a flaming hoop, and you know, yeah, I got this. Now I can eat my pork rib that is undercooked and has some parasites in it, but I can take my proton pump inhibitor and be safe. Well, turns out not. Long-term administration of proton pump inhibitors, those are antacids, cause bacterial overgrowth in the stomach and duodenum. Now, it's interesting that these, and we're looking at the Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology, these are main journals. So how can you say that we don't know what causes it? It's not clearly defined or clearly understood. I don't know. I always thought doctors had the ability to read. So when you look at this, proton pump inhibitors and a risk of gastric cancers. So it turns out, and we're going to go over the mechanism of this, but you have a muscle on top of the stomach, okay? There's a huge amount of acid inside of the stomach, and when that acid is present, that muscle on top of the stomach tightens up. So acid can't come in the esophagus where the tissue is totally different. And so if you've had reflux or GERD or any of that, they always say, oh, it's from too much acid. Okay, that's that little book that the leading cause of death in America read that have no bearing on reality. Okay, the reflux comes from too little acid. And in fact, the drugs they give to decrease the acid increases cancers of the esophagus. So the exact reason that they're prescribing this is actually causing it. Yeah, wait do you see the research I'm doing now for polio. Oh my God. Okay, yeah. Antacids loosen the lower esophageal sphincter, causing acid to flow up the esophagus. So they literally are they're creating the mechanism that doctors know can damage the tissue. Now, now this also is gut motility, and this is just that beautiful peristaltic wave that pushes food through the entire gastrointestinal system. Normal GI motility involves a highly complex, tightly coordinated series of events designed to move material through the GI tract. During periods of fasting, a migrating motor complex develops approximately every 90 to 120 minutes to sweep residual debris through the tract. So this means you're not even thinking about it. You know, has mucus linings get off of the intestinal tract or off of the stomach, or as you swallow your saliva, there's always this beautiful wave that pushes food through because your body is always breaking down tissue, absorbing nutrients, your gallbladder is secreting, your pancreas is secreting. Impaired gastric peristalsis, that's that movement, can lead to SIBO due to static food and bacteria in the upper GI tract. Absolutely. So what causes slow gastric motility? Well, for one, stress. Under physical, chemical, or emotional stress, blood supply and nerve supply to the gut shut down or decrease. So under stress, you got 4 times less blood flow to the GI tract, along with a change in enzymes, so low enzyme production. That means you can't break down the nutrients. You've got poor nutrient absorption. Wow, this sounds like we're getting close to the symptoms of SIBO, doesn't it? Decreased oxygenation of the gut, so that means increased toxicity. Elevated cholesterol, why? Because that's going to be your body's requirement for cortisol, which is an anti-inflammatory. Elevated triglycerides, decreased gut floral populations. When we talked about how the normal gut flora of the intestinal tract is decreased, stress does that. Wow, interesting. Now, how common is stress in our society? They say 1 in 2 have moderate stress. I mean, I kind of think it's a lot higher than that. But how are these people being diagnosed? Are they misdiagnosed because under stress, blood pressure has to elevate, cholesterol has to elevate, okay? And are they misdiagnosed with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders? Are those diseases or the adaptation to stress? We know this. I mean, this is you. I just did, I had a patient come in from about an hour south of here, travels in sales, okay, and she's fine. She's fine. I don't have any problems whatsoever. Okay, and she's talking to me like this. Okay, now granted, I'm about 4 feet away during the consultation, but I'm going, "Hun, your neck is driving me crazy." She says, "Yeah, it was really bugging me a few months ago. My hands were even going numb, but then I had this epidural injection in my neck, and it's just fine." I said, "Dear, it's not fine." Okay, she's a traveling salesperson. Okay, super high stress. I'm gonna show you what fine is. So let's look at this system. how it actually works. Okay, now, you've got a nose above this. That nose smells certain nutrients. And depending on what hits that olfactory bulb, that sensory organ, the brain, your body is going to start to either salivate to start to break down carbohydrates. Certain acids are going to be produced in the stomach, okay? And those acids are going to be specific for what you're smelling. So if you're smelling broccoli, it's going to be a different acid than Brussels sprouts or carrots or lamb or beef or chicken. It's going to be totally, totally different. So, well, this works on the wall, but not on the thing. So then it goes into the stomach. And you got that muscle on top of the stomach right here called the lower esophageal sphincter. And then the stomach, that closes off, and then it gets sloshed around. Then it hits a small area called the duodenum. Okay, now the duodenum has great sensors in there. And this is where minerals are absorbed, so you need high acid to get minerals in the system. The gallbladder senses that fat in the system, so it stores and concentrates bile. Instantly the gallbladder contracts, and then the pancreas has bicarb as well as digestive enzymes that secrete into the same area of the duodenum. So this is where fat absorption and mineral absorption takes place in the duodenum. Then it goes down further and further and further. And remember, this is everything that you eat follows this pattern. Whether it's broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, anything. Okay, it's going to go through here. Does the Tylenol do that too? Yeah. Antacids do that? Yeah, the medications for high blood pressure, all the drugs and chemicals that you take actually follow the same pathway. And that's why you're going to see a lot of the medications that cause it are also disrupting that normal flora. I heard the most beautiful thing, and this was by Dr. Tilden in the early 1900s. He said the inside of the intestinal tract is the outside of the body. Now think of that, okay? If you could, just like a cartoon, shine a light down here, and if that light could bend through the entire intestinal tract, it'd be shining out here. Am I the only one that saw that Tom and Jerry cartoon? But trust me, it could really work if we could straighten out the intestinal tract, okay? Okay, so when you look at this, anything that we're putting in there, so it can. We do have bacteria in the entire intestinal tract, but not an overgrowth of it. Now it goes through the jejunum, then it goes through the ileum, and then it dumps into this large thing called the large intestine, into the secrum. Now there's so much bacteria in here. The way that the design feature is we have an appendix, which is a lymph tissue that produces certain things to keep the bacteria in check. I mean, what a brilliant spot to put it, and it's called the appendix. And then the food goes through, and this is where most of the water absorption takes place. And then it goes out, gets concentrated. Once all the nutrients are gone and the water's been absorbed, then it's flushed out the system. Then we run into problems like people taking an antacid, removing the gallbladder, okay, not wiping out the appendix, having high stress. You know, when I get people with all the parts, it's a lot easier to fix them. It really is. I mean, 100 years from now, you know, I mean, I'll probably only be able to do this for another 4 or 5 years before we're kicked off, because they're trying to pass laws now to make it illegal to comment on other people's work that you just read. Really? Yeah, the movie Vaxxed is, they're trying to make it illegal. No, you can watch porn in California, don't worry about it, but for God's sake, stay away from the movie Vaxxed.
Free speech is gonna be gone.
Yeah, free speech is yeah, it's going pretty quick. Okay, now, what's your natural defense against abnormal bacteria growth in the beautiful system we have? Bacterial flora of the gastrointestinal tract is an important factor for the preservance of integrity of normal functioning humans. Absolutely. So we have a normal flora. So what protects you from SIBO? Your normal healthy gut bacteria. Now, and when you look at this, the bacteria in your system are so vital. I mean, the bacteria produce vitamins like folates, vitamin K. They have their impact on sensory and motor functions. The intestinal bacteria are influenced by a lot of different factors: composition of the food, environment, drugs, alcohol, several other factors. So let's look at some of the things, because when we're talking about SIBO, let's look at what affects it. Well, for sure, vaccinations, okay, because those actually can cause a leaky gut. For sure, antibiotics. For sure, medications and processed foods. And now, wait a second, it can't be that simple. It is. Now, there's no human being that has ever been alive on our planet that has gone through generational exposure of these neurotoxins. This is unique in America, unique in the world. And we're seeing the result of that. Okay, we're seeing the result of the sickest population the world's ever seen. 69 doses of 16 different vaccines until you're 18. Now, no other country in the world does it. Now, mind you, when you talk to the automatons, the ones that say vaccines are safe and effective, amen, okay. Well, did you know that none of these require or have ever done a randomized controlled trial? Now, this is the gold standard. This is where you take a group of people, dividing them up into thirds. 1/3 gets a placebo, 1/3 gets a therapy, 1/3 is a control group, and you follow them for a few years. Okay, and that has never been done, ever, with vaccines. What they do is they compare one vaccine to another vaccine. There are no randomized controlled trials. There are very few animal trials, okay, and there's only one animal trial that I know of that involved all of these. Now, that was published in the Journal of Neurology, and the problem is it was pulled because it showed that every animal had a negative neurologic effect: brain damage, loss of social behavior, and you can't have anything that negatively affects the opinion of this. Now, what we're looking at, each one of these causes an inflammatory response. Every vaccine, so when you get the vaccine at 12 hours, that triggers an inflammatory response. Okay, this is 12 hours, brand new kid, just first time in the world. At 2 months, you get the diphtheria, the tetanus, the pertussis, the polio, the Hib, the rotavirus, the hepatitis B, and the POV. Okay, so you get these at month 2. Then you go back 2 months later at month 4. So now you've been on the planet for 4 months. Yes, it's time for your second round of DPT. Okay, granted, we know it sheds, we know it can increases your risk of pertussis B, we know that the studies are dangerous, we know that polio, this particular polio we don't give to other countries because it's never been shown to protect you from polio, and it's not the one that they gave out in the sugar cubes in the 50s. Again, another rotavirus, another good PCV, and then you go in 2 months later, what are you going to get? I mean, the parents go into this absolute ignorant fall back. Okay, I got vaccinated. No human being on the planet has ever had this schedule. Okay, we're seeing the results of that. So realize that if you're on this schedule, you are an experiment. Okay, and all you got to do is look around at the health of our population. Now, the way you're supposed to be exposed to normal viruses, bacteria, funguses is through the nasal and oral mucosa. And this is what's called a Th1 response. Now, you need a robust, healthy gut flora. That means if you're not having something, or the healthy bacteria in your diet, healthy bacteria in your environment, or you're taking things that destroy your healthy gut flora, you're not going to be able to mount a healthy immune system response. So you need a healthy gut flora in order to maintain a healthy immune system. Now, a Th2 response, this is vaccine, this is acute damage, this is an acute inflammatory response. And this is why there's no humoral and cellular immunity. There's no beautiful cascade. This is an acute trauma that you get ready to fight something. And this is why we have a massive rise in inflammatory illnesses. And if you look at the rise in inflammatory illnesses, I mean, you're talking how many encephalitis, autism, irritable bowel conditions, okay, asthma, allergies. I mean, they got peanut-free days at the ballpark, for God's sake. So this is insane. Now, artificial sweeteners. So let's say we want to develop chemicals to sell to the public and we're going to make them patentable. I want to bind chlorine onto a sugar molecule. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what a brilliant idea. By God, the body's going to taste that sweetness, but it's going to recognize the chlorine as toxic and poisonous and get it the hell out of the system. So you're not going to get any absorption. You're right. Don't bring that up. Yes, the chlorine molecule can break off and can cause really bad stuff. It can destroy the gut flora. So this means what's better, the pink stuff, the blue stuff at Starbucks? No. None. Go home, make some nice, healthy, organic coffee with healthy filtered water and use some organic sugar. Because this thing increases the pH level in your intestinal tract, making it not healthy for the healthy bacteria that you got. It reduces the amount of good bacteria. And I love this. Sucralose has a potent inhibitory effect on your gut bacteria and inactivates the digestive protease, which alters the gut barrier function, Journal of Toxicology. Now, when we look at this, antibiotics, okay, now this is huge. If you're not taking them, if you're taking commercial animal products, you're getting them. But of the 154 million prescriptions for antibiotics written in doctors' offices, the CDC says 30% of those are unnecessary. So we're talking 50 million. 50 million prescriptions are totally unnecessary. Of those, 44% of the outpatient antibiotic prescriptions were written to treat acute respiratory conditions, which there is no absolute benefit whatsoever. It's nuts. But when you go to a medical doctor, the leading cause of death in America, and they give you, they diagnose your symptoms and they look up that book and they say, well, gee, you have an ear infection and bronchitis and a sinus infection, and I'm not supposed to give you any drugs. But I have no knowledge of nutrition or anatomy or physiology, so I'm not going to recommend high-dose vitamin C. So all I can really do to get paid from you and your insurance company is to prescribe you a drug that's worthless. And in fact, it actually increases your risk of cancer and damage. Welcome to America, okay? Or you can run a concentrated animal feeding operation, okay? And this is where 70% of the antibiotics are used. So if you're eating commercial meats, this is not good for you. Now, the effect of antibiotics, anti means against, bio means life. Okay, now so we have something that's a poisonous mold that's against life. Now, it can kill both beneficial and pathologic bacteria. This is why we have MRSA infections and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But yeast, huge problem with yeast and candida and molds because of the high antibiotics in our system. And this literally causes that leaky gut where you get, instead of the food going down the esophagus to the stomach to the jejunum, the ileum, the jejunum and ileum start to develop holes and you get undigested proteins, undigested fats floating around in the system, and then that causes increased allergies, increased inflammation. It's devastating. Glyphosates, now this is in every bread product, it's in every wheat product that's not organic. This stuff is psychotic. It's a very powerful selective antibiotic. Okay, now we're talking, EPA is talking between 40 and 800 times the antibiotic threshold concentrations shown in clinical studies to damage mammalian tissue. So do not give this to the local whale. Don't give it to the local dolphin, okay? I don't know why our government says it's okay, but I know Hillary is being promoted by Monsanto, so she's going to get in, so don't worry. Okay, now the EPA is saying, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture saying processed slow-release pesticide-laden gluten causes, what does it cause? Intestinal permeability, leaky gut, imbalance of the gut bacteria. That sounds like setting up for SIBO. Immune activation and allergic response. That sounds like it's getting more of an allergic or an inflammatory response to abnormal proteins. Impaired digestion and damage to the intestinal wall. And this is in almost every packaged product. Now, what type of medications negatively affect that gut flora? Because remember, we're talking about vaccinations, medications, antibiotics. Antibiotics are one of the medications, antacids, birth control pills. Yeah, estrogen is not good for you. Steroids, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. How about occasional Advil, Motrin, Aleve? Okay, all of those disrupt the normal gut flora. Antidepressants. Well, yeah, if you got a gut issue, you're sad, so you got to take these. Statins, okay, cholesterol-lowering drugs. Why would that do it? My God, your body makes every glucocorticosteroid, mineralocorticosteroid, and sex hormone out of cholesterol. To take a drug to lower it is absolutely ignorant. Now, when we look at this, the keys to healing, we're talking about the nervous system because it controls everything, exercise because it moves everything. What you put in your system means something, and sleep and prayer and meditation. So where does this come from? You've got this automatic nervous system, and you've got this vagus nerve. No, whatever happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. We're talking about something totally different. Jeez, the crowd you got here. Okay, so you got this esophagus that comes down, and this vagus nerve goes on the front and the back of the esophagus and follows it down to innervate it. Now, I'm not kidding, okay, because this was kind of fun when I was teaching anatomy. They had an operation called a vagotomy. Okay, where they cut the vagus nerve. Now this is for people with really, really bad indigestion. And they cut it, and it felt really good. They didn't have that. Of course, they developed a shitload of other problems, okay? You know, because it kind of does a lot of different stuff. You know, it pretty much is the peristaltic action of the entire intestinal tract. And it's, I mean, I know, mind-boggling. Now the vagus runs close to, it comes out of the brain right around that top bone of the neck. So any subluxations, you know, what do they call it? Tech neck, okay, all of that. Now, spinal misalignments in any of these regions can lead to neurologic compromise and altered digestive function. Why? Because you've got to look at the nervous system first. Parasympathetic is also called the rest, digest, and repair. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. When we know that stress can alter this through the journal articles that we're looking at, by God, you got to have this system balanced. If you're under a parasympathetic control, this stimulates peristalsis. Remember they were talking about slow gastric motility? It stimulates the release of bile. What does the sympathetic do? It slows down that gastric motility. I mean, so if decreased gastric motility is part of the symptoms and part of the cause, let's look at what controls the gastric motility. Was that too complicated? Okay, honest to God. Okay, now, I want to show you what abnormal bowel gas looks like and what a normal bowel looks like. Now, she was actually diagnosed with ASIA, which is a bowel disorder, inflammatory response from vaccines. Okay, now, you'll find out that because the federal government lied and falsified data, her claim was never accepted. But luckily, she's doing good and she's healthy. Here's two kids. We're talking normal gut flora, abnormal gut flora. No vaccines, vaccines. Okay, this is your drug, this is your brain on drugs. Okay, remember the frying egg in the frying pan? I mean, it's just so common now. Now, so how do we rebuild the intestinal tract? Well, first you get the nervous system working right. And then we got to repair the intestinal lining and ease off the inflammation. Get rid of the bacterial overgrowth by eating a diet rich in essential nutrients that your body hasn't been absorbing. And that kind of makes sense. So you got to avoid bad stuff. Processed food, GMOs. Why? Because GMOs are soaked in glyphosates. grains, particularly the toxic ones that are soaked in glyphosates, artificial and processed sugars, pasteurized and homogenized dairy. Remember, we're training our bodies to be, or if you're vaccinated, you're training to respond with an inflammatory response. Pasteurized dairy is some of the sickest animals the world's ever seen. There's no way you'd want to drink the milk from these poor creatures, because they're given hormones to maintain them being pregnant, because only pregnant animals give milk, and there's millions and millions of bacteria per liter. Okay, but don't worry about it. The pasteurization kills the bacteria. However, you got millions of dead bacteria in that liter of milk. I mean, raw organic milk, okay, has healthy bacteria. This stuff has got dead bacteria in there, which again causes an inflammatory response. And if it's even worse, if you got a leaky gut, you're getting those dead bacteria and the undigested proteins if it's homogenized, that means the beautiful, healthy fats are now shards of fat that can damage and cause inflammation. Unhealthy meat. Yep. It's better to eat the skunk that's roadkill, okay, than go to McDonald's. Okay, I'm telling you right now. Okay, unhealthy fats. The polyunsaturated fats, corn oil, canola oil, soy oil, flax oil unless it's freshly ground, cottonseed oil. Good God, nobody eats cotton plants except for cows. Okay, so those are all polyunsaturated fats that cause an inflammatory response. So don't eat that list, eat this list. Okay? I mean, it seems too simple. You get the nervous system working right. You get the small fish, anchovy, mackerel, sardines, green leafy vegetables, carrots, squash. I mean, cook this stuff up with a little sauteed of coconut oil, good God. And then for dessert, you toss a banana, some blueberries, some grapes, honeydew melon in the blender. You know, put a couple of frozen bananas in there and a little bit of spring water. Oh my God. Doesn't that sound good? And no, honey, this smoothie, I'm helping my gut flora. It's just like good. Okay, now gut and psychology syndrome, the GAPS diet. Okay, coconut oil, why? Because the rich, healthy fats help the brain function. Eat fruit in between meals, not with meals, and that kind of makes sense too. They call it, there's certain food combinings where you want that sweetness and that carbohydrate. Bone broth is excellent. Probiotic-rich foods, so this is fermented foods, kombucha, cultured vegetables, raw dairy, fermented dairy. Okay, I mean, it's fantastic. We got an advantage here. There's a farms called Fermentation Farms close by. Phenomenal. Now, supplements. Remember, we're missing the intestinal bacteria that produce certain vitamins. So we got to supplement with those until our intestinal bacteria get up and running. So vitamin B12, very common. Vitamin D, phenomenal for the immune system. Vitamin K, because our bacteria aren't producing it yet. Probiotics, digestive enzymes. And the probiotics, make sure it's not just one bacteria. Try and get one with multiple bacteria in there. Iron and zinc, and make sure the iron and zinc are in whole food form. Okay, because if you get fortified with iron, if you see that, it's literally iron ore. Do the experiment with fortified Cheerios and a magnet in water. It's a trip. I know. Okay, now sources for B12. You know, you're talking raw cheese, sardines, animal sources, lamb, raw milk, eggs, wild salmon. When we look at vitamin D, sun is the best time, but we're getting out of the summertime going into fall here. Even at Huntington Beach, we're not going to get a lot of sunlight. So if your shadow is longer than your body, you're not getting enough. Or if you're working inside like me from 4 o'clock in the morning to, you know, what is it, 8 o'clock tonight? Okay, I'm not getting a lot of sun. So vitamin D supplementation is fantastic. And it should be 3,000 units for international units for every 100 pounds of body weight, and that's safe. Now, vitamin D and K2, they have a synergicity where they work together. And K2 sources, again, are grass-fed animal products, butter, ghee, fermented foods, the cheese with a mold on it, like Goudas and Bries. Natural sources of vitamin K, dark green leafy vegetables. And if you are taking blood thinners, it's going to say, for God's sake, don't get dark green leafy vegetables because they have vitamin K, and vitamin K is involved in clotting. Now, any doctor that's really that ignorant, okay, because you know, it's like saying orange juice is involved in immune system. For goodness sake, don't take any orange juice if you have an autoimmune condition. It's like, what? You know, no, back away from that lettuce. For God's sake, it's going to clot your arteries, you damn vegetarian. Can you see how psychotic this is? We actually have a letter to give to the doctor that's giving the blood thinners to explain that dark green leafy vegetables, even though they have vitamin K, they're not going to clump your blood in your arteries and stroke you out. Honest to God. I mean, you know, this is, you know, what's that movie? The wrestler got elected president. Idiocracy. Yeah, we are now going into idiocracy. Okay, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, fermented dairy again. And you're seeing this is like absolutely fantastic. Fermented foods, we've got several videos on how to ferment it, and it's so easy. You chop it up, cut it up, put it in a jar, put a little bit of spring water in there, leave it on the counter for about a week to 10 days until it starts to ferment. It's fantastic. Natural sources of iron. Now, beef liver, when we put these animal products up here, make sure that they are organic and healthy and not from a concentrated feedlot. Oysters, chickpeas, I mean, who wouldn't want a little bit of hummus? Hummus, lentils, dark green leafies, and chocolate. Yes, chocolate is a good source. Natural sources of zinc, kefir, yogurt, again with the chickpeas and hummus. Oh my gosh. Pumpkin seeds. They got chocolate-covered organic pumpkin seeds with 70% dark organic cacao at Whole Wallet Market. Okay, mushrooms, Whole Foods. Okay, sorry. So this is literally how you fix it. Doesn't it make sense? And it's super simple, but it's almost like you're listening to what your body's doing. Now, we got it on the handout, basic supplements, and it's pretty much the same chart. Death and health neither have symptoms. And every time you make a decision, you're either going towards one or away from the other. You know, and it's really simple. You can screw up a little bit, you can screw up occasionally, you don't need to be obsessed about this. But the more good you do in your life, the healthier your life is going to be. You know, and it's just, you know, I get people all the time saying, well, for God's sake, you know, I couldn't sleep this weekend. I said, that's okay, you can sleep now. Go back to the sleep thing. Or I went to a birthday party, and I get this all the time. One of our patients had Crohn's disease, and she's only 8 years old, and she lives back east, like up in Chicago area, and she had a birthday cake. Okay, wiped her out, made her upset, diarrhea, and I said, no problem, you know, get some water, get some fermented veggies, you know, and she's fine. So do more good stuff than bad stuff.